Vintage and historic cars have long interested me, even back when I was a young lad growing up on the Canadian prairies. In those days, my particular attraction was to Model A Fords, largely stimulated by a Roadster of that make owned by an older cousin in our community. But it wasn't until 1949, when I was a university student, that I owned my first vintage car, in this case a 1923 Model T Ford. This was a rare, rather strange center door model, and very awkward to enter either the front or the back seats. I paid $75 for it, but shortly found that my university funds couldn't really stretch to such an investment, and had to sell it 6 months later, at a small profit I might add, to a fellow enthusiast. So the years slipped by, with many cars, both new and older models, passing through my hands. However, it wasn't until I moved to Australia in the 1960s that I tracked down something vintage, namely a 1930 Model A Roadster, similar to the one owned by my cousin all those years ago. However, this was no original beauty, but a basket case requiring a lot of searching for missing parts and plenty of body panel work, in Australia called panel beating. During the course of this reconstruction, I ran across and bought a nice 1929 Chevrolet Phaeton, which had been stored away for many years in an old farm garage near where I lived in Canberra. This was an original one-owner vehicle with only 75,000 miles on the clock. As it was drivable and in so much better shape than the Model A, I ceased work on the Ford and conducted a minor refurbishing job on the Chev, which then served me adequately in many subsequent vintage car events. Nevertheless, I continued to tinker with the Ford, although it wasn't until 2004 that I finally completed restoration and registered it in our local car club, where it won an award the following year. Now, with two vintage cars, I hankered for something a bit more modern, but retaining the characteristics of the 1940s. Fortunately, I was lucky enough to find just such a vehicle, a 1948 Plymouth Coupe. This was a fine original model with low mileage, 44,000 miles, and with many of the factory extras of the day. The only drawback was its location, 10,000 miles away in the U.S. state of Ohio, which involved considerable expense for inspection and shipping back to Australia. So that's the story of my stable of older cars. A few of the others I have owned are also included in the photos, the most valuable of which was a rare 1932 Chrysler Imperial. This is now part of the collection of another of our club members who is slowly restoring it to its past glory. Thank you very much, from Brian McKay.